My mother Angela poured scalding coffee directly over my head at a 5-star hotel brunch. "You selfish trash," she screamed while my brother Christopher and sister Amanda filmed it, laughing. The burn blistered my scalp instantly. They posted it online with the caption, "When your broke sister ruins brunch." What they didn't know, I just sold my AI company to Google DeepMind for $110 million. They thought I was poor. I was about to teach them the difference between broke and broken. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type "interested" in the comments. And I will give you a heart. My name is Emma Mercer, and until 3 weeks ago, my family thought I was a failure. A cautionary tale. The sister who'd wasted her computer science degree on freelance coding jobs that barely paid rent. The daughter who lived in a cabin in the woods because she couldn't afford city life. The one who showed up to family events in thrifted clothes and drove a 10-year-old Subaru with a cracked windshield. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt, and I let them. Because the truth was so much more complicated than their simple narrative of my inadequacy. The truth was that I'd founded SafeMind, an artificial intelligence safety company focused on alignment protocols that prevent AI systems from causing harm. The truth was that I'd spent 7 years building proprietary algorithms that made AI exponentially safer. The truth was that 3 weeks before this brunch, Google DeepMind had acquired my company for $110 million. After taxes, legal fees, and paying out my small team, my personal net worth sat at approximately $250 million. But my family didn't know that. They knew what I let them see: a quiet woman in her early 30s who worked from home, lived simply, and never talked about her job because talking about neural networks and machine learning protocols at Thanksgiving dinner made people's eyes glaze over. They interpreted my silence as shame. My simplicity as poverty. My choice to live in a cabin as evidence I couldn't afford anything better. And I let them believe it because their opinion of me had stopped mattering somewhere around the 5th time my mother Angela compared me unfavorably to my siblings at a family gathering. The Sapphire Hotel brunch was supposed to be a celebration. My grandmother Rosie's 85th birthday. She'd specifically requested that all her grandchildren attend, which is the only reason I'd driven 3 hours from my mountain cabin to the city. I'd arrived in my usual outfit, dark jeans, a gray thrifted hoodie, and boots that had seen better days. My hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup. No jewelry except for the simple watch I'd worn since college. I looked exactly like what they expected, the poor relation showing up to a fancy event underdressed and out of place. My brother Christopher was already there when I arrived, holding court at the outdoor terrace table with a view of the city skyline. He was 34, 2 years older than me, and he looked the part of success he'd always craved. Tailored suit. Expensive watch. Hair styled with product that probably cost more than my entire outfit. He sold luxury watches on commission at a boutique dealership downtown, and he'd built his entire identity around the image of wealth. The leased Range Rover. The designer suits bought on credit. The Instagram feed full of champagne and rooftop bars and the illusion of abundance. My sister Amanda was beside him, 28 and equally committed to the performance. She called herself a lifestyle coach, which as far as I could tell meant she posted inspirational quotes on Instagram and charged people $300 an hour to tell them to drink more water and practice gratitude. She lived in a condo our parents paid for, wore clothes she bought and returned after photographing, and had perfected the art of looking successful while being completely, utterly broke. My mother Angela sat at the head of the table like a queen surveying her kingdom. 59 years old and fighting aging with the desperation of someone whose entire identity was wrapped up in appearance. Designer dress. Professional highlights. Jewelry that looked expensive until you knew it was costume pieces bought at consignment shops. She'd spent her entire life curating an image of upper-middle-class sophistication while my father worked himself into an early grave trying to fund it. He died 3 years ago, and within 6 months she'd burned through his life insurance maintaining the facade. And my grandmother Rose, the birthday girl, sat quietly at the other end of the table, watching everything with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She was the only one who'd ever asked me real questions about my work. The only one who seemed to understand that I'd chosen my life rather than settled for it. But even she didn't know about the acquisition. I'd planned to tell her privately, away from the circus of my siblings' jealousy and my mother's calculations about how my success could benefit her image. I should have known better than to hope for a peaceful meal. The attack came before the food even arrived. Christopher cornered me near the terrace railing, away from the table, his cologne so strong it made my eyes water. "Emma," he said, his voice pitched low and confidential, the tone he probably used on customers he was about to oversell. "I need to talk to you about an opportunity." I knew immediately where this was going. Christopher always had opportunities. Investment schemes. Business ventures. Loans he never intended to repay. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my face neutral. "My dealership is expanding," he said, leaning against the railing in a pose he probably thought looked casual and confident. "We're bringing in a new line. Patek Philippe. High-end pieces. 6 figures per watch. But inventory is tight. I need to secure stock before the other dealers snap it up." He paused, watching my face for a reaction. "I need $50,000. Just a bridge loan. Short term. 6 weeks tops. I'll pay you back with interest. $50,000. He said it like it was nothing. Like I had that kind of money sitting in a checking account waiting to fund his delusions. "I don't have $50,000 to loan you," I said. It wasn't a lie. I didn't keep that kind of cash liquid. My wealth was in investments, real estate, structured accounts that couldn't be accessed with a phone call and a sob story. "Come on, Emma," Christopher said, his voice developing an edge. "You could put it on a credit card. You have good credit, right? You're responsible. Stable. You could qualify for a card with that kind of limit." He actually believed this. He actually thought I would go into debt to fund his watch inventory. "No," I said simply. "I'm not putting $50,000 on a credit card for you." His face changed. The friendly mask slipped and what showed underneath was ugly. Pure entitlement mixed with resentment. "You're so selfish," he said, loud enough that heads turned at the table. "Mom has paid for everything for us our entire lives. She covered Amanda's condo deposit. She helped me with the Range Rover down payment. And you can't even help your own brother with a simple loan." This was the narrative they'd built. My mother as the generous matriarch. My siblings as deserving recipients. And me as the selfish holdout who refused to participate in the family ecosystem of financial codependency. "Mom paying for your lives isn't generosity," I said quietly. "It's enabling. And I'm not going to enable you too." Christopher's face went red. He opened his mouth to respond, but my mother's voice cut across the terrace. "What's going on over there?" Angela stood up from the table, her radar for conflict finely tuned after decades of managing family drama. "Christopher is asking me for $50,000, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. And I said no. The silence that followed was the kind that precedes explosions. My mother's expression cycled through shock, calculation, and then settled on righteous indignation. "You refuse to help your brother?" she asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. "With a business opportunity." "It's not a business opportunity," I said. "It's debt he's asking me to take on so he can maintain his lifestyle." "Your lifestyle," Amanda chimed in from the table, her phone already in her hand like she was preparing to document whatever came next, "is living in a shack in the woods and driving a car that's older than some of my clients' children. Maybe if you invested in yourself, you'd understand investing in family." A shack in the woods. My cabin was a custom-built architectural masterpiece on 20 acres of pristine forest. I'd paid cash for the land and construction. But they'd never seen it. They'd never been invited. They only knew I lived remotely and assumed that meant poverty. I understand investing, I said. Which is why I know better than to throw money at a depreciating asset. I meant the watch inventory. Christopher took it personally. I'm not a depreciating asset, he snarled. You're just bitter because you've never had anything worth investing in. You work from home in your pajamas and call it a career. You don't understand real business. Real business, I repeated. Like selling watches on commission. That's your real business. It's more than you've ever done, he said. At least I take risks. At least I put myself out there. You hide in the woods and code for pennies and judge the rest of us for actually trying to succeed. This was the fundamental disconnect. They measured success in visible markers. Cars. Clothes. Square footage. The appearance of wealth. I measured it in actual wealth. Assets. Equity. Money that worked for me instead of me working for money. But explaining that to people who'd built their entire identities on leverage and debt was like explaining color to someone who'd only ever seen black and white. I'm not judging you for trying to succeed, I said. I'm refusing to fund your failure. That's when my mother snapped. She'd been getting more agitated as the argument escalated, her face flushing, her hands clenching and unclenching. She was a woman who'd spent her entire life controlling the narrative, managing perceptions, ensuring that her family looked successful even when they were drowning in debt. And here I was, refusing to play my assigned role. Refusing to be the grateful daughter who contributed to the family fund. Refusing to acknowledge her authority. Angela walked to the coffee service on the side table. Picked up the ceramic pot, still full, still hot, steam rising from the spout. I watched her do it. Watched her hands grip the handle. And I knew what was coming half a second before it happened, but I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me afraid. You selfish trash, she screamed, her voice cracking with rage. And then she tilted the pot. The coffee hit me like a physical blow. Scalding hot. The heat was immediate and shocking, burning my scalp, running down my neck, soaking into my hoodie. The pain stole the breath from my lungs. I felt my skin blistering in real time, felt the fabric of my clothes absorbing the liquid and holding it against my body, extending the burn. But worse than the pain was the sound that followed. Laughter. Not gasps of horror. Not shocked silence. Laughter. Christopher and Amanda already had their phones out. The red recording lights blinked like tiny malicious eyes, documenting my humiliation for their social media feeds. My mother stood there panting, the empty pot dangling from her hand, her face a mask of self-righteous satisfaction. And I sat there, liquid dripping from my eyelashes, physical pain radiating down my spine, and I realized with absolute clarity that the bridge wasn't just burned. It had been nuked from orbit. There was no coming back from this. No apology that could undo it. No family therapy that could repair it. They just documented their own cruelty in 4K and they didn't even realize it. I stood up slowly. Didn't wipe the coffee from my face. Didn't acknowledge the pain that was currently searing through every nerve ending in my scalp and neck. I looked at each of them in turn. Christopher with his phone held high, still recording. Amanda typing furiously, probably already drafting the caption. My mother breathing hard, waiting for me to scream or cry or give her the dramatic reaction she craved. And I gave them nothing. Just turned and walked to the hotel bathroom, my boots clicking a steady rhythm against the marble floor. Behind me I heard Christopher's voice, "That's right. Run away. Go cry in your truck." I kept walking. Inside the bathroom, I locked the door and leaned over the sink. My reflection stared back, hair matted with dark liquid, skin turning an angry red along my hairline and neck, small blisters already forming behind my left ear. The urge to scream was a physical thing, a creature clawing at the back of my throat. But I didn't scream. Didn't cry. Didn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, I grabbed paper towels and carefully, methodically dabbed at the worst of the coffee. The skin was tender, already peeling in places. Each touch sent fresh waves of pain through my nervous system. But I kept my face neutral. Kept my breathing steady. Because I understood something they didn't. If I screamed, I gave them content. If I cried, I gave them satisfaction. They thrived on chaos, on the noise of dysfunction. They were vampires of reaction, and the only way to win was to starve them. Silence is a mirror. When you don't scream back at a monster, the monster is left screaming into a void, hearing only the echo of its own ugliness. I walked back out to the terrace. The table had gone quiet, but the energy was electric with malice. Christopher still had his phone up. Amanda was posting. My mother stood with her arms crossed, waiting for the apology she genuinely believed she was owed. I walked to the table and pulled out my wallet. Took out 4 $20 bills. $80. My share of the breakfast I hadn't eaten. I placed the bills on the white tablecloth, smoothed them flat, and then turned and walked away without a word. The silence I left behind was heavier than any scream could have been. It was the sound of a door closing, locking, and being welded shut forever. They thought they'd won because they held the cameras. They didn't realize they just filmed their own execution. And I was about to show them the difference between looking successful and actually having power. Because while they were posting their little video for likes, I was planning their complete and total destruction. And unlike their fake empire built on credit cards and lies, my resources were very, very real. I sat in my Subaru in the hotel parking lot for exactly 7 minutes before I started the engine. Not because I was crying. Not because I was processing trauma. But because I was making a list. A very specific, very methodical list of every action I was about to take, in order, with timelines and expected outcomes. This is what people don't understand about engineers, especially those of us who work in AI safety. We don't think in emotions. We think in systems. Problems and solutions. Inputs and outputs. Cause and effect. My family had just created a problem. I was about to engineer a solution. The coffee had soaked through my hoodie and was starting to cool against my skin, which somehow made the pain worse. The initial shock had worn off and now every nerve ending in my scalp was screaming. I needed medical attention. But first, I needed documentation. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and took photos. Close-ups of the blisters forming along my hairline. The redness spreading down my neck. The soaked hoodie with visible coffee stains. I took 12 photos from different angles, each one time-stamped and geotagged by my phone's metadata. Then I opened my voice recorder and made a statement. Today is Sunday, October 15, 2023. The time is 11:47 a.m. I am sitting in the parking lot of the Sapphire Hotel in downtown Seattle. Approximately 20 minutes ago, my mother Angela Mercer poured scalding coffee over my head during a family brunch. The assault was witnessed by multiple people and was filmed by my brother Christopher Mercer and my sister Amanda Mercer. I have sustained second-degree burns to my scalp and neck. I am now driving to urgent care for medical treatment. This recording serves as my initial statement of events. I stopped recording. Saved the file. Backed it up to 3 different cloud services. This is the part where most people would call the police. Report the assault. Press charges immediately. But I'm not most people, and I understand something fundamental about justice in America. it's not about who's right. It's about who has better documentation and more resources to pursue it. I had both. But I also had something more valuable: patience. I started the car and drove to the nearest urgent care facility. The intake nurse took one look at my neck and immediately flagged me as priority. Within 15 minutes, I was in an examination room having my burns assessed by a doctor who looked younger than me and far too cheerful for someone treating second-degree burns. "This is going to hurt," she warned, preparing to clean the wounds. "I know," I said. It did hurt. The cleaning solution felt like fire on top of fire. But I kept my face neutral, my breathing steady, because pain is just information. It tells you something is damaged. It doesn't require an emotional response. "How did this happen?" the doctor asked as she worked. "My mother poured hot coffee on me," I said flatly. The doctor's hands paused for half a second. "I'm sorry, what?" "During a family brunch. She got angry about something and threw coffee at me. It was intentional." "That's assault," the doctor said, her professional demeanor cracking slightly to show genuine concern. "Have you contacted the police?" "Not yet," I said. "I wanted medical documentation first." "Smart," she said, and resumed cleaning. "I'm going to need to report this. We're mandated reporters for assault cases." "I understand," I said. "Please include in your report that the assault was filmed by 2 witnesses who were laughing during the incident." The doctor looked up at me, her expression shifting from concern to something harder. "They filmed it?" "Yes. I expect they've posted it to social media by now. They found it entertaining." The doctor finished treating my burns in silence, her jaw tight. She prescribed antibiotics to prevent infection, pain medication I had no intention of taking because I needed to think clearly, and a specialized burn cream. She also provided me with detailed medical records, photographs of the injuries taken with proper medical equipment, and her professional assessment that the burns were consistent with scalding liquid being poured directly onto the skin from above, indicating intentional assault rather than accidental spillage. I thanked her, paid the bill in cash, and left with a folder full of documentation that would make any prosecutor weep with joy. The evidence was airtight. Medical records, photographs, witness testimony from a licensed physician. And the perpetrators had filmed themselves committing the crime. But I still wasn't calling the police. Not yet. Because I understood something my family didn't: revenge isn't about immediate gratification. It's about maximum impact. And maximum impact requires setup. I drove to my cabin, which wasn't actually a cabin in the traditional sense. The property was a custom-designed architectural masterpiece built into the side of a mountain, all glass and steel and clean lines, with solar panels on the roof and a geothermal heating system that made it completely off-grid. I designed it myself, worked with architects to bring the vision to life, and paid cash for every square foot. The construction alone had cost $3 million. But my family had never seen it. They'd never been invited. They only knew I lived in the woods and assumed that meant I was poor. The assumption said more about their values than my reality. Inside, I went straight to my home office, a converted bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley. My setup was worth more than Christopher's car: 3 4K monitors, a custom-built workstation with processing power that rivaled small server farms, and enough encrypted storage to hold the entire Library of Congress several times over. This was where I'd built SafeMind. Where I'd written the algorithms that made AI safer. Where I'd created something valuable enough that Google DeepMind had paid 9 figures to acquire it. I sat down, logged into my secure system, and opened a folder I'd created that morning titled Family. Inside, I began organizing files. First went the photos from urgent care. Then the medical records. The doctor's statement. My voice recording from the parking lot. I created subfolders for each family member: Angela, Christopher, Amanda. Then I began filling them. It took me 4 hours of focused work, but when I was finished, I had comprehensive dossiers on each of them. Financial records pulled from public databases. Social media archives going back years. Property records showing the houses they claimed to own were actually rentals or heavily mortgaged. Credit reports that I acquired through perfectly legal means that I'm not going to explain because some things are better left as trade secrets. The picture that emerged was devastating. Christopher was $68,000 in debt across 7 credit cards. His watch dealership job paid him $45,000 a year base salary plus commission. He'd had 3 good months in the past 2 years. The Range Rover lease was 4 months overdue. He was being sued by a former business partner for $20,000 over a failed investment scheme. Amanda's lifestyle coaching business had generated exactly $11,000 in the past year. Her condo was paid for by my mother, who'd taken out a second mortgage on her own house to cover the down payment. Amanda had $23,000 in credit card debt and her Instagram followers were 60% fake accounts she'd purchased. My mother Angela was the most interesting case study. After my father died 3 years ago, she'd inherited his life insurance, approximately $400,000. Within 18 months, she'd burned through $350,000 maintaining her lifestyle. The designer clothes, the country club membership she couldn't afford to quit because of the social implications, the constant financial support she provided to Christopher and Amanda to maintain the illusion that the family was successful. She was bleeding money at a rate that would bankrupt her completely within 2 years. They were drowning. All of them. Living in a house of cards built on credit and appearances, one unexpected expense away from total collapse. And they'd just assaulted the one person in the family who actually had the resources to help them. The irony was almost beautiful. While I was researching, my phone started buzzing. Text messages coming in rapid succession. I ignored them for 30 minutes, letting them pile up, before I finally looked. They were all from Amanda. The first one was a screenshot. It was a TikTok post. Christopher's face filled the frame, filtered and smug, with text overlay that made my blood run cold. When your broke sister tries to ruin brunch. The video began. I watched myself sitting at the table, head bowed, coffee dripping from my chin while my mother screamed in the background. The audio was crystal clear. "You selfish trash." The caption read, "Putting out the trash. Family Edition." The video had been up for 3 hours. It had 67,000 views. I scrolled to the comments. They were exactly what Christopher had wanted. Validation from strangers who had no context, no understanding of what had actually happened. "She looks like a wet rat," one user wrote with a laughing emoji. "Serves her right for mooching off her family," another said. "That hoodie though. Girl needs a makeover and a job," said a third. Amanda had shared it to her Instagram story with a crying laughing emoji and the text, "When keeping it real goes wrong. Karma is served hot." They were celebrating. Actually celebrating. High on the dopamine rush of likes and shares and the validation of their echo chamber. They genuinely believed they'd won. That this was the end of the story. That they'd put the family embarrassment in her place and could now return to their champagne brunch and their performance of success. They didn't understand that on the internet, context is currency. And the market was about to crash. I didn't report the video. Didn't comment. Didn't engage at all. Instead, I took screenshots. Lots of them. The original post with its timestamp. Every comment. Amanda's Instagram story. I saved them to my family folder in a subfolder labeled Evidence. Then I did something my family would never expect because they'd never bothered to really know me or understand how my world actually worked. I went to LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile was sparse. Emma Mercer, AI safety researcher. That was it. No company listed. No details about SafeMind because the acquisition hadn't been publicly announced yet and I'd signed an NDA. Just a professional headshot and a list of published papers on AI alignment that had my name on them. I had 800 connections, mostly other engineers, researchers, and people in the tech industry. People who actually knew me and my work. I made a single post. No text. Just a share of the TikTok video with a simple caption, "Family doesn't always mean safety." If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, there are resources available. Documentation matters. Protect yourself. I hit post and closed my laptop. Then I made myself a cup of tea, took my pain medication despite my earlier resistance because the burns were genuinely excruciating, and went to bed. When I woke up Monday morning, the world had shifted on its axis. My phone was on fire. Not with messages from my family this time, but with notifications I hadn't expected. LinkedIn notifications. Hundreds of them. I opened the app with a sense of dread mixed with curiosity. My post had been seen by 43,000 people. The tech community, it turned out, was both small and incredibly connected. Someone had recognized me. A former intern from SafeMind who'd gone on to work at Meta had commented, "Wait, is this Emma Mercer? The SafeMind founder? Did your family just assault one of the most important researchers in AI safety?" That comment had spawned a thread. Another researcher I'd collaborated with, "I can confirm that's Emma. I worked with her on the alignment protocols paper. This is horrifying." Someone from Google DeepMind, carefully worded to avoid violating NDAs, "The person in this video recently made significant contributions to AI safety that will benefit humanity for decades. The irony of her family treating her this way is devastating." The post had jumped platforms. Someone had screenshotted the LinkedIn thread and posted it to Twitter. From there it had exploded. Tech Twitter had found the original TikTok. The narrative was shifting in real time, and I watched it happen from my bed, coffee mug in hand, burns throbbing despite the medication. The top trending topic on Twitter was #SafeMind, but it wasn't about my company. It was about my family. This woman just sold her company for 9 figures and her family threw coffee on her for being broke. Someone find out who these people are. The brother works at Timeless Luxury Watch Dealers in Seattle. Imagine bullying a self-made millionaire because you're broke and stupid. The mom is Angela Mercer. She's on the board of the Seattle Arts Council. Someone who assaults their own child shouldn't be representing the arts community. They'd found them. The internet had doxed my family in less than 12 hours, and they'd done it with receipts. Christopher's dealership was being review-bombed. Amanda's Instagram was flooded with comments calling her an abuse enabler. My mother's Arts Council profile had hundreds of emails demanding her resignation. And the view count on the original TikTok? 4 million and climbing. Not because people thought it was funny anymore, but because the tech community had turned it into a case study in how families abuse successful members they don't understand. My phone rang. It was Elena Rodriguez, the PR director I'd hired to handle the SafeMind acquisition announcement. We'd been planning a carefully orchestrated press release for next month. "Emma," she said, her voice tight with stress. "Have you seen Twitter?" "I've seen it," I said calmly. "Do you want us to issue takedown notices? We can have the video removed for harassment violations. We can scrub this from the internet in 10 minutes. I sipped my tea and looked out at the valley. The sun was rising over the mountains, painting everything gold. "No," I said. "Leave it up. Emma, it's humiliating. It makes you look like a victim." "It's not humiliating for me, Elena. It's illuminating for everyone else. Let it play out. Let people see exactly who these people are and what they do to family members who don't fit their narrative." "You're sure?" she asked. "I'm certain. The best revenge isn't making them look bad. It's letting them show everyone who they really are without any help from me. They filmed their own crime. Let them live with the consequences. I hung up and opened Twitter again. The retweet counter was spinning like a slot machine. Journalists were reaching out for comment. The Seattle Times had already published a piece, "Local Tech Founder Assaulted by Family at Luxury Hotel Brunch." The narrative was out of my hands now. It had taken on a life of its own. And unlike my family's carefully curated image of success, this narrative was built on truth. They'd wanted attention. I was about to give them the world's attention. And they were going to learn that when you document your own cruelty and post it for likes, sometimes the algorithm doesn't just give you validation. Sometimes it gives you justice. And justice, unlike their fake empire, doesn't need a credit card to function. It just needs evidence. And I had plenty. By Tuesday morning, Christopher's world had started to collapse. He just didn't know it yet. I woke up at 6 a.m., the burns on my scalp still tender but healing, and made myself breakfast while monitoring multiple screens. One showed Twitter, where the hashtag had evolved from hashtag SafeMind to hashtag coffeeabuse and was now trending globally. Another displayed Christopher's dealership website. The third tracked web traffic to a shell company I'd set up 6 months ago for exactly this kind of situation. Because here's what people don't understand about wealth at my level: it's not about having money. It's about having infrastructure. Systems. Mechanisms that operate independently of your direct involvement. I'd built those systems carefully over the past 3 years, ever since the first venture capital firm had offered to acquire SafeMind, and I'd realized I needed to diversify, to create layers between my visible life and my actual assets. One of those layers was Apex Ventures, a private equity firm I'd established with $20 million in seed capital. It invested in mid-tier companies, the kind that were successful enough to be stable but small enough that a sudden cash infusion could buy controlling interest. Companies like, for instance, the luxury goods holding corporation that owned the franchise rights to Christopher's dealership. I'd been watching that company for 8 months. Their stock was undervalued. Their management was competent but cash poor. They were expanding into Asian markets and needed capital. 3 weeks ago, before the brunch, before the assault, I'd had my lawyers approach them with an acquisition offer. Not for the whole company. Just a controlling stake. 60%. Enough to have final say on major decisions. Including personnel. The deal had closed on Friday. 72 hours before my mother poured coffee on me. The timing wasn't planned. It was just fortunate. Christopher walked into Timeless Luxury Watches that Tuesday morning with no idea that the company he worked for was now ultimately owned by the sister he'd just helped humiliate online. He straightened his tie, checked his hair in the reflection of the display case, and prepared for another day of selling watches to people who wanted to look successful without actually being successful. His manager, a man named David Chin who I'd never met but whose employment file I'd reviewed extensively, approached him holding an iPad. "Christopher, corporate wants a word." Zoom meeting. Now. Christopher probably thought he was getting a promotion. Or maybe a warning about social media usage. His TikTok video had gone viral, after all. Surely corporate had seen it. Maybe they wanted to talk about maintaining professional boundaries online. He had no idea what was actually coming. The conference room was small, sterile, with glass walls that looked out onto the showroom floor. Christopher sat down, smoothed his suit jacket, and joined the Zoom call. 3 faces appeared on screen. The regional director, Marcus Webb, looking grim. An HR representative named Jennifer Park, her expression carefully neutral. And a third window, blacked out, labeled simply ownership. I was in that blacked out window. Sitting in my home office in leggings and an oversized sweater, burns still visible on my neck, watching my brother's face as he tried to figure out what was happening. Mr. Mercer, Marcus began, his voice clipped and professional. We've received thousands of complaints regarding a video you posted on social media. The content shows you filming and mocking what appears to be an assault on a family member. Our legal team has reviewed the footage and determined that your behavior constitutes gross misconduct, conduct damaging to the brand reputation, and a violation of our ethics policy. Christopher's confident expression cracked. It's a private family matter, he stammered. It was just a joke between siblings. It has nothing to do with work. There is nothing private about 4 million views, Jennifer from HR cut in. And there is nothing funny about assault. We've also received information that the woman in the video is Emma Mercer, the founder of SafeMind, whose recent acquisition by Google DeepMind made international news. You filmed yourself laughing while your mother assaulted one of the most prominent women in technology. Do you understand the optics of that? I didn't know she she never said, she lives in a cabin and drives a piece of shit car. Christopher was spiraling now, his careful image crumbling in real time. How was I supposed to know she was rich? You weren't supposed to know anything, Marcus said. You were supposed to not film assault and post it for entertainment. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You have 15 minutes to clear your personal items from your desk. You can't do this, Christopher said, his voice rising. I have rights. I have a contract. My sales numbers are good. You can't fire me over a family video. We can and we are, Jennifer said. This is an at-will employment state. But more importantly, you've created a liability for the company. We've already lost 3 corporate accounts because of the association with your video. The financial damage alone justifies termination. This is because of her, Christopher said, and I could hear the desperation in his voice now. My sister did this. She's vindictive. She's always been jealous of me. That's when I unmuted my microphone. Kept my camera off. Let my voice fill the conference room through the speakers. Your sister, I said, each word clear and precise, is the majority shareholder of the holding company that owns your franchise rights. Your sister is the reason this company had the capital to expand into new markets. Your sister has a zero-tolerance policy for bullies and abusers, which is clearly outlined in the updated ethics policy you signed 6 weeks ago and apparently didn't read. The silence in that conference room was so complete I could hear Christopher's breathing through the microphone. Shallow. Quick. Panicked. Pack your desk, I continued. Leave the demo watch you've been wearing. You can't afford it and it was never yours to begin with. Security will escort you out. If you attempt to enter the building again, you'll be arrested for trespassing. If you attempt to contact any current employees, you'll be sued for harassment. Am I clear? Emma, Christopher whispered, his voice breaking. Please. I need this job. I have payments. I have debt. I'll apologize. I'll delete the video. I'll do whatever you want. What I want, I said, is for you to understand that actions have consequences. You filmed assault. You posted it for entertainment. You called me selfish for refusing to fund your lifestyle. Now you get to learn what selfish actually looks like. Goodbye, Christopher. I ended the call. Muted myself. Sat back in my chair and took a sip of coffee, the irony not lost on me. On my screen, I watched Christopher's face cycle through emotions, shock, denial, anger, bargaining, and finally a kind of hollow acceptance. Security appeared at the glass door. He stood up on shaking legs and followed them out. One down. My phone rang 30 seconds later. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Same number. Persistent. On the 3rd call, I answered. What? Emma, it's Christopher. Please. Please don't do this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. If I'd known you were rich, I never would have. I mean, I would have been more respectful. I just thought. You thought I was poor, so I deserved to be treated like trash. I finished for him. That's the problem, Christopher. Your respect is conditional on perceived wealth. You only value people who have what you want. And now you're learning that the person you treated like garbage had everything you were pretending to have. I'll pay you back, he said desperately. The $50,000. I'll get it somehow. I don't know, I'll work it out. Just give me my job back. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I'm not giving you anything, I said. Not money. Not a job. Not forgiveness. You filmed assault and posted it for likes. You celebrated my humiliation. Now you get to live with yours. Every time you apply for a new job and they Google your name, that video will be the first thing they see. Every time you try to explain what happened, you'll have to admit you laughed while your mother burned your sister with coffee. That's your legacy now. You built it yourself. You're destroying my life, he said, and he was crying now, actual sobs coming through the phone. Over a stupid video. Over one mistake. I'm not destroying anything, I said. I'm just stopping my participation in the machine that kept you functioning. You destroyed your own life. You were just hoping I'd keep paying to repair the damage. I'm not paying anymore. I hung up. Blocked the number. Turned back to my screens. Amanda was next, though her unraveling would be different. Christopher's identity was tied to his job, his image of being a successful businessman. Amanda's identity was entirely digital, built on Instagram followers and the illusion of influence. Destroying her required a different approach. I'd already started it the night before with a single anonymous tip to 3 of her biggest sponsors. Brands are sensitive about their image. They pay influencers to represent their products, to make their company look good by association. When one of those influencers gets caught on camera laughing at assault, brands don't ask questions. They just pull the contracts. Amanda had 5 active sponsorships when she woke up Tuesday morning. By noon, she had 0. The first email came from a boutique fitness wear company. Dear Amanda, in light of recent events and the values our brand represents, we've decided to terminate our partnership effective immediately. Per clause 7.3 of your contract, conduct that damages brand reputation is grounds for immediate termination without compensation for remaining posts. We wish you well in your future endeavors. The same email, with minor variations, came from a skincare company, a wellness supplement brand, sustainable fashion label, and a meal kit service. 5 income streams, gone in 4 hours. But the real damage came from her followers. Instagram's algorithm is designed to detect suspicious activity. Sudden drops in engagement. Patterns that suggest fake accounts. And I'd hired a forensic digital analyst to prove what I'd suspected for months. 63% of Amanda's followers were purchased bots. I didn't report her to Instagram myself. I didn't have to. I just made sure that information got to a tech journalist who'd been investigating influencer fraud. She published the story Tuesday afternoon, Lifestyle Coach's Empire Built on Fake Followers and Family Money. The article included screenshots of Amanda's inflated follower counts, analysis showing the suspicious patterns, and the detail that really killed her credibility. Her mother had been paying for the bot followers using the last of my father's life insurance money. Amanda's phone was probably melting from the notifications. Her comment section had turned into a war zone. You're not just fake, you're cruel. Laughing at assault while pretending to be a wellness coach. Imagine buying followers and still being this pathetic. Your whole life is a performance and the audience just left. But I wasn't done with Amanda yet. Because unlike Christopher, who at least worked for his money even if he spent it stupidly, Amanda had never actually earned anything. Everything she had, the condo, the car she borrowed from her mother, the lifestyle she performed online, was funded by other people. And I was about to cut off the funding. My mother Angela had taken out a second mortgage on her house to cover Amanda's condo down payment. That mortgage was held by a small regional bank that had been struggling since the 2023 banking crisis. They'd been quietly looking for someone to buy out their riskier loans. Apex Ventures had bought Amanda's mortgage on Monday. For 63 cents on the dollar. A bargain. Now I owned my sister's debt. Which meant I could call it due whenever I wanted. I had my lawyer send the letter Tuesday evening. Dear Ms. Amanda Mercer, please be advised that your mortgage loan has been acquired by Apex Ventures Capital Management. Per the terms of your original agreement, the new holder of your debt has the right to request immediate payment in full or restructure the payment terms. We are formally requesting payment in full within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in foreclosure proceedings. Current balance due, $287,000. Amanda couldn't pay it. She had maybe $11,000 to her name, most of it from sponsorships that no longer existed. My mother couldn't pay it either. She barely had enough to cover her own mortgage. Which meant in 30 days, Amanda would lose the condo she'd been using as a backdrop for her fake lifestyle posts. The photography studio for her performance of success. The foundation of her entire online presence. Gone. I could have just let it happen. Watched her scramble and fail and lose everything. But I wanted her to know. Wanted her to understand exactly who was pulling the strings. So I sent a text from a burner phone. Amanda, it's Emma. I own your mortgage now. You have 30 days to pay $287,000 or you lose the condo. I'm sure you can get a loan from Mom, though. Oh wait, she's broke too because she spent Dad's life insurance buying you fake followers. Good luck with your wellness journey. Maybe try manifesting a house. I turned off the burner phone, removed the SIM card, and dropped it in my paper shredder. 2 down. But Angela, my mother, the architect of this whole dysfunction, she was different. Christopher's identity was his job. Amanda's was her image. But my mother's identity was control. Power. The ability to manipulate her children and maintain the appearance of a perfect family while quietly destroying us all. Destroying her would require something more surgical. More permanent. And I knew exactly where to start. Because while Christopher and Amanda were losing their jobs and their homes, my mother was about to lose something she valued even more, her reputation. The carefully cultivated image of the perfect mother, the arts patron, the pillar of Seattle society. I was about to show the world who Angela Mercer really was. And unlike her children's small-scale consequences, what was coming for her would be very, very public. My mother Angela had spent 40 years building her reputation in Seattle society. She sat on the board of the Arts Council. She chaired the annual spring gala that raised money for local museums. She was photographed at charity events wearing clothes she'd return the next week, holding champagne glasses she couldn't afford to fill at home, smiling that practiced smile that said, "I belong here," to anyone who might question her credentials. Her entire identity was wrapped up in perception. In what other people thought of her. In the careful construction of an image that had nothing to do with reality. She was a woman who'd married my father for stability, pushed him to work himself to death to fund her lifestyle, and then burned through his life insurance in 18 months maintaining the illusion that she was someone who mattered. And now that illusion was about to shatter in the most public way possible. The Seattle Arts Council met every third Thursday of the month. Their meetings were technically open to the public, but nobody ever attended except board members and occasionally a journalist doing a puff piece on local philanthropy. This Thursday would be different. I didn't attend myself. I had no interest in watching my mother's public humiliation in person. But I made sure other people would be there. People who mattered. People with cameras and questions and the authority to demand answers. I'd spent Tuesday and Wednesday building the case. Not just against my mother, but against the entire facade she'd constructed. It started with a phone call to investigative journalist Rebecca Chin at the Seattle Times. Rebecca specialized in exposing fraud in nonprofit organizations. Charity boards that funneled money to family members. Arts councils that existed primarily to give wealthy people tax deductions. She was relentless, thorough, and she hated people who used charitable organizations as personal piggy banks. Rebecca Chin, she answered on the second ring. Miss Chin, my name is Emma Mercer. I have information about financial irregularities on the Seattle Arts Council board. Specifically involving board member Angela Mercer, who happens to be my mother. There was a pause. The Emma Mercer. Safe mind. The coffee video Emma Mercer. That's me, I said. And the woman who threw that coffee sits on a nonprofit board that handles hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations and public grants. I thought you might be interested in looking into how she's been using her position. I'm listening, Rebecca said, and I could hear her already typing. I walked her through what I'd found. Angela had been on the Arts Council board for 12 years. In that time, she'd pushed through 3 major contracts with vendors who provided services for the annual gala. Catering. Venue rental. Event planning. All 3 vendors were owned by the same parent company. A company that had paid Angela $60,000 over the past 3 years in consulting fees that were never disclosed to the board. It was a classic kickback scheme. The Arts Council paid inflated prices for services. The vendor kicked back a percentage to the board member who'd approved the contract. Everyone made money except the charity, which was paying 30% more than market rate for everything. How did you get this information? Rebecca asked. My mother is not as careful about operational security as she thinks she is. She keeps financial records on her home computer. I have access to that computer from when I helped her set it up 5 years ago. And before you ask, yes, I have documentation. Contracts. Bank statements. Emails between her and the vendor discussing the arrangement. I'll send you everything. This is seriously problematic, Rebecca said. If even half of this is verifiable, she's committed fraud. The Arts Council could lose its nonprofit status. There could be criminal charges. I know, I said. Which is why I'm also sending this information to the Washington State Attorney General's office, the IRS, and every other board member on the Arts Council. I want this public. I want everyone to see exactly who Angela Mercer is behind the designer clothes and the charity event photos. Why now? Rebecca asked. Why are you doing this now? Because she threw hot coffee on me and filmed it for entertainment, I said. And because I'm done protecting people who use institutions and relationships as weapons. She's been stealing from a charity that's supposed to support arts education for underprivileged children. She's been doing it for years. And she got away with it because nobody bothered to look closely at the perfect mother who cared so much about the arts. I'll have a story ready by tomorrow, Rebecca said. Front page. With your permission, I'd like to connect the coffee incident to this. Show the pattern of behavior. Woman who assaults her daughter is also defrauding charity. It's a complete picture. You have my permission, I said. Use everything. The article published Thursday morning, 6 hours before the Arts Council meeting. The headline was devastating: Arts Council board member accused of fraud while assaulting tech founder daughter. Rebecca had done thorough work. She'd verified every document I'd sent. She'd interviewed other board members who confirmed they'd never been told about Angela's consulting fees. She'd gotten statements from vendors who'd competed for contracts and lost to the company paying kickbacks. She'd even included a sidebar about the coffee incident, complete with stills from the viral video showing Angela's face clearly as she poured the coffee. The article included a line that made me smile: Angela Mercer could not be reached for comment. Her daughter Emma declined to comment beyond providing financial documentation and expressing hope that the Arts Council will investigate thoroughly. By noon, 3 other board members had resigned. By 2 p.m., the Attorney General's office had announced an investigation. By 4 p.m., when the monthly meeting was scheduled to begin, there were news cameras outside the building. Angela showed up anyway. I watched the footage later, sent to me by Rebecca, who'd had a cameraman outside. My mother arrived in her Mercedes, the one that was 2 payments behind, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost $2,000 that she didn't have. She walked past the cameras with her head high, refusing to answer questions, performing dignity she hadn't earned. Inside the meeting room, according to the minutes that became public record later, the board president asked for her resignation immediately. Angela refused. Said she'd done nothing wrong. That the consulting fees were legitimate. That her daughter was mentally unstable and seeking revenge for perceived childhood slights. She actually said that. Called me mentally unstable. The woman who'd assaulted me on camera was telling a room full of board members that I was the problem. The board president didn't argue. Just called for a vote. It was unanimous. Angela Mercer was removed from the Seattle Arts Council effective immediately. She was also banned from attending any future events or using the Arts Council name in any capacity. Her 12 years of carefully cultivated social status, gone in a 15-minute meeting. But I still wasn't done. Because Angela's fraud wasn't just about the Arts Council. It was about every institution she'd ever touched. Every relationship she'd ever weaponized. Every person she'd ever manipulated. I'd spent years watching her operate. Watching her collect people like accessories, using them for social advancement and then discarding them when they were no longer useful. She had a pattern. She'd befriend wealthy women, get invited to their charity events, network her way into positions of minor authority, and then leverage those positions for personal gain. The Arts Council was just the most recent example. Before that, it was the Junior League. Before that, the Hospital Foundation. I documented all of it. And now I was going to share it. I created a website. Simple. Clean. Professional. The domain was whoisangelamercer.com. On the homepage, I put a single photo. The still frame from the viral video showing coffee in mid-air, my mother's face twisted in rage, my own face about to be burned. Below it, text, "This is Angela Mercer." On October 15, 2023, she assaulted her daughter at a family brunch. But assault isn't the only thing she's done. Below you'll find documentation of fraud, manipulation, and financial abuse spanning 12 years. Then I organized everything into categories. Arts Council fraud, with all the contracts and bank statements. Junior League financial irregularities, where she'd paid herself consulting fees from event budgets. Hospital Foundation gifts that were supposed to be anonymous but that she'd claimed credit for publicly. Credit card fraud, where she'd opened accounts in my father's name after he died and run up $30,000 in charges before the banks caught on. Every instance of financial manipulation I could document. Every lie she'd told about her own success. Every time she'd used charity money to fund her personal lifestyle. I didn't editorialize. Didn't add commentary. Just presented the facts with dates, amounts, and supporting documentation. Then I did something that would ensure the website went viral. I bought ads on Facebook and Instagram, targeted specifically to Seattle residents, especially women over 40 who were likely to be in Angela's social circle. The ad was simple. Just the photo and the text, "Do you know this woman? You should." Within 24 hours, the website had 80,000 visitors. Within 48 hours, local news stations were running stories. Tech founder creates website exposing mother's alleged financial crimes. My mother's phone must have been on fire. Her friends, the ones she'd cultivated so carefully, were calling to ask questions. Were distancing themselves publicly. Were removing tags from old photos on Facebook. Because associating with Angela Mercer wasn't just awkward anymore. It was toxic. She tried to fight back. Posted on Facebook claiming she was being cyberbullied by her mentally ill daughter. Said I'd always been troubled, always been jealous of my sibling's success, and this was revenge for not getting enough attention as a child. The post lasted 6 hours before the comments turned completely against her. People she thought were friends posted screenshots from the website. Asked point blank if the documents were fake. She couldn't answer because they weren't fake. Every receipt was real. Every bank statement verified. Every email authentic. Her lawyer sent a cease and desist letter demanding I take down the website. My lawyer responded with a simple message: truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Every document on the website is authentic and verifiable. If your client believes otherwise, she's welcome to sue. Discovery will be fascinating. The letter also included a reminder that I was still pursuing criminal charges for the assault, and any additional harassment would be documented and added to the case. Angela didn't sue. She couldn't afford to. Thursday evening, 48 hours after the article published, my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera and saw a car idling at my gate. Angela's Mercedes. Christopher was with her. Probably Amanda too, though I couldn't see the back seat. They'd found my property. Must have hired a private investigator, spent money they didn't have to track down the daughter they'd assaulted. I pressed the intercom button. You're trespassing on private property. Leave. Open this gate. Angela screamed, her voice distorted by the speaker system. You tricked us. You let us think you were poor. You lied to us. That was her narrative. Not that she'd assaulted me. Not that she'd committed fraud. But that I'd deceived her by not advertising my wealth. In her mind, my success was the betrayal. I never lied, I said calmly. You never asked. You assumed. You saw what you wanted to see because it made you feel superior. Now leave. We know you're in there, Emma. Christopher shouted, leaning on the gate. You owe me my job. You owe us. You have millions and you let us struggle. You struggled because you spent money you didn't have on things you didn't need, I said. That's not my responsibility. I'm your mother. Angela shrieked. You owe me respect. You owe me gratitude. I raised you. You assaulted me, I said. On camera. That's what you did. You burned my skin because I wouldn't give Christopher money for watches. That's who you are. And now everyone knows it. Open this gate right now. Angela demanded. We're going to sue you for defamation. For emotional distress. For ruining our lives. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, Angela. Everything on that website is documented fact. And emotional distress. You threw hot coffee on me. I have medical records. You want to compare emotional distress in front of a jury, we can do that. I pulled up a second camera view on my monitor. A black SUV was coming up the access road behind their car. Blue lights flashing silently. Also, I continued, you should know I filed for a restraining order Tuesday. Based on the assault. It was granted this morning. And the police arriving behind you are here to enforce it. If you're still at my gate in 60 seconds, you'll be arrested for violating a protection order. On screen, Angela's face went from rage to fear. She looked behind her, saw the police SUV, and something in her finally broke. Not into remorse. Into pure, undiluted panic. She scrambled back to her car. Christopher was already in the passenger seat. They pulled away so fast they left tire marks on my gravel driveway. The police followed them to the property line, ensuring they actually left. One officer called my phone from the gate. "Ms. Mercer, they're gone. Do you want to press charges for the trespassing?" "Not this time," I said. "Just make sure they understand the restraining order is enforceable. If they come back, arrest them." "Understood. Stay safe." "Ma'am." I hung up and looked at the monitors. My driveway was empty again. The mountains were turning gold in the late afternoon sun. My coffee was getting cold on my desk beside me. I was alone in my house that they'd never seen, on property they couldn't access, living a life they'd never understand. And for the first time in my entire relationship with my family, I felt completely at peace. They'd come to my home expecting to intimidate me into backing down. To use their physical presence as leverage the way they'd always used guilt and obligation. But I wasn't the poor sister anymore. I wasn't the family doormat. I was the woman who documented every crime, hired better lawyers than they could imagine affording, and understood that power isn't about who screams loudest. It's about who has the resources to make their choices matter. And my resources were just getting started. 3 weeks after the restraining order was served, I received a letter that changed the final equation of this entire situation. It came by certified mail, which meant I had to sign for it, which meant it was important. Legal. The kind of correspondence that matters. The return address was from Whitmore and Associates, estate planning attorneys. My grandmother Rose's lawyers. I opened it standing in my kitchen, the autumn sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and I read it twice before the words actually registered. "Dear Ms. Mercer, we regret to inform you that your grandmother, Rose Elizabeth Vance, passed away peacefully in her sleep on November 3, 2024. Per her final instructions, we are contacting you before any public announcement or family notification. Mrs. Vance made significant changes to her will and estate plan in the weeks before her passing. She specifically requested that you be informed of these changes privately. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the details of her estate and your role as primary beneficiary and executor." Primary beneficiary. Executor. I sat down at my kitchen island, the letter still in my hand, and felt something crack open in my chest. Not grief, not yet, that would come later when I had time to process that the one person in my family who'd actually seen me was gone. But something else. A kind of final vindication mixed with profound sadness. Grandma Rose had been at that brunch. Had witnessed the coffee being thrown. Had watched her daughter assault her granddaughter while her other grandchildren filmed it. And apparently, she'd made some decisions. I called the law office. A woman answered, professional and gentle. "Whitmore and Associates, how may I direct your call?" "This is Emma Mercer. I received a letter about Rose Vance's estate." "Ms. Mercer, yes. Mr. Whitmore has been expecting your call. One moment please." The hold music was classical. Vivaldi. It felt appropriate somehow. Grandma Rose had loved classical music. "Ms. Mercer," a man's voice came on the line, warm but businesslike. "Thank you for calling. I'm Robert Whitmore. I had the privilege of serving as your grandmother's estate attorney for the past 32 years. First, let me offer my condolences. Rose was a remarkable woman." "Thank you," I said. The letter mentioned changes to her will. "Significant changes," Robert confirmed. "Made on October 18th, 3 days after what she described to me as an incident at the Sapphire Hotel that clarified everything. I'm going to be direct with you, Ms. Mercer. Your grandmother rewrote her entire estate plan after witnessing your mother's assault. She was, in her words, done pretending that biology creates obligation." I felt tears sting my eyes. That sounded exactly like Grandma Rose. What did she do? She removed Angela, Christopher, and Amanda from her will entirely. The estate, which includes her home valued at approximately $2.3 million, investment portfolios worth roughly $3.8 million, and various other assets totaling another $1 million, has been left exclusively to you. You're also named as executor, which means you'll be responsible for managing the estate settlement. $6 million. My grandmother had left me $6 million and cut out her own daughter completely. There's more, Robert continued. She also left instructions that were, well, quite specific about the reading of the will. She requested that it be done in person, with all family members present, and that a particular letter she wrote be read aloud before the distribution of assets is discussed. She was very clear that she wanted Angela to understand exactly why she was being disinherited. When is the reading? I asked. We typically schedule these within 2 weeks of death. Given the family dynamics and your grandmother's specific requests, I wanted to check with you first. Are you comfortable being in the same room as your mother and siblings? I understand there's a restraining order. There is, I confirmed. But a legal proceeding like a will reading is an exception. I'll be there. When? Friday, November 17th. 2 p.m. at our offices downtown. I'll notify the other family members today. They don't know she's dead yet. I asked. Per your grandmother's instructions, you were to be notified first. She wanted you to have time to prepare emotionally before, and I quote, the vultures start circling. I laughed despite myself. Despite the grief. Despite everything. Because that was so perfectly Grandma Rose. Strategic even in death. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Not financially, I didn't need the inheritance, though I'd honor my grandmother's wishes by accepting it. But emotionally. Preparing to sit in a room with the people who'd assaulted me, humiliated me, tried to destroy me, and watch them learn that even the matriarch of their family had finally seen them for what they were. The funeral was 3 days before the will reading. I attended. Sat in the back row of the church and watched my mother perform grief for an audience of Rose's friends and neighbors. Watched Christopher and Amanda stand on either side of her, propping her up like pillars supporting a collapsing structure. They saw me. Christopher's face went red. Amanda looked away. My mother's eyes met mine across the church and I saw hate there, pure and undiluted. Not grief for her mother. Just rage at me for existing. For surviving. For winning. I didn't approach them. Didn't offer condolences. Just attended the service, placed a single white rose on the casket, my grandmother's favorite flower, and left before the burial. I'd said my goodbyes privately. I didn't need their performance of family unity. The day of the will reading, I arrived at Whitmore and Associates 15 minutes early. Robert met me in the lobby, a man in his 60s with kind eyes and an air of competence. Ms. Mercer, thank you for coming. I want to brief you before the others arrive. Your grandmother's letter is, well, it's quite direct. She doesn't mince words about why she made the decisions she made. Are you prepared for how your family might react? I've been preparing for their reactions my entire life, I said. I'll be fine. There's also the matter of the estate's cash assets. Your grandmother left specific instructions that you're to receive immediate access to her liquid accounts to, quote, ensure Emma has the resources to protect herself from whatever my daughter attempts next. That's approximately $800,000 that will be transferred to you today, before the estate settles. She thought Angela would try something, I said. She was certain of it, Robert confirmed. Rose was very clear-eyed about her daughter's character, especially after the assault. She told me Angela had spent 40 years using family relationships as weapons and she wasn't about to let that continue after her death. We walked to the conference room. Large mahogany table. Leather chairs. Windows overlooking downtown Seattle. the setting for the final act of my family's long dysfunction. Angela arrived next, flanked by Christopher and Amanda. She'd aged in the past month. The stress of investigations, public scandal, and now her mother's death had carved new lines into her face. She wore black, expensive black, probably purchased specifically for the funeral and definitely purchased on credit she couldn't afford. She looked at me with barely controlled fury. "You have some nerve showing your face here after what you've done to this family." "I was invited," I said calmly. "By grandmother's lawyers. I'm following her wishes." "Her wishes," Angela spat. "You manipulated a dying old woman. Poisoned her against her own daughter. You've destroyed everything and now you're here to gloat." "Mrs. Mercer," Robert interrupted, his voice firm. "I'll ask you to refrain from accusations. Your mother was of completely sound mind when she made her estate decisions. I have medical documentation confirming her mental capacity. Now, please, everyone sit. We have a will to read." We sat on opposite sides of the table. Me on one side with my lawyer Karen, who I'd asked to attend for support. Angela, Christopher, and Amanda on the other side with a lawyer they'd apparently hired, a nervous-looking young man who kept glancing at his phone like he'd rather be anywhere else. Robert opened a leather folder and pulled out documents. Before we discussed the distribution of assets, Rose left a letter to be read aloud. Per her instructions, I'll read it now in its entirety. He cleared his throat and began. "To my daughter Angela, and my grandchildren Christopher and Amanda. If you're hearing this letter, I'm dead, and you're sitting in a lawyer's office expecting to inherit my money. I'm sure you've already spent it in your heads. Probably calculating how much the house is worth, how quickly you can sell it, how you'll split the proceeds. I'm sure Angela has already planned how she'll use her share to restore her reputation. How Christopher will pay off his debts. How Amanda will buy her way back into relevance. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you're getting nothing." Angela's face went white. "You're getting nothing because you deserve nothing. And before you start screaming about how unfair this is, let me explain exactly why I made this decision. Angela, you are my daughter, and I loved you the way mothers love their children, automatically and without condition. But love doesn't require blindness. I've watched you for 60 years. Watched you marry a good man and work him to death funding a lifestyle you couldn't afford. Watched you favor Christopher and Amanda while treating Emma like she was an obligation instead of a gift. Watched you steal from charities to maintain your image. Watched you pour coffee on your own daughter because she wouldn't fund your delusions." Robert's voice didn't waver, but I could see him pause slightly, giving weight to the words. "I was at that brunch. I saw everything. I watched you assault Emma, and I watched Christopher and Amanda film it like it was entertainment. I watched you humiliate the one grandchild who actually built something real, who actually succeeded without leveraging debt and lies. And I made a decision. I decided that I would not fund your dysfunction after my death the way I enabled it during my life. Every dollar I give you would be gone within 2 years. Spent on appearances. On maintaining the illusion that you're someone who matters. Christopher would use it to pay debt and then immediately create more debt. Amanda would buy followers and sponsorships and continue the performance of success without ever building anything real. And Angela, you would use it to restore your tarnished reputation, to buy your way back into the social circles that have rightfully rejected you." The room was silent except for Robert's voice. "Emma, on the other hand, doesn't need my money. She's worth more than I ever was. She built a company that makes the world safer. She lives authentically, without pretense, without using other people as props in her performance of success. She's the only one of you who understands that wealth is measured in what you own, not what you owe. So I'm leaving everything to her. Not because she needs it, but because she's the only one who deserves it. The only one who won't waste it. The only one who might actually do some good with it. To Angela, Christopher and Amanda, you taught me that biology doesn't create obligation. That being family isn't about shared DNA, it's about how you treat each other. You treated Emma like garbage, and you did it on camera for the world to see. Now you get to live with the consequences. I hope you learn from this, but I doubt you will. People like you never do. You'll blame Emma. You'll call her manipulative. You'll say she poisoned me against you. But the truth is simpler. I just finally opened my eyes and saw what she's seen her entire life. You're users. Takers. People who confuse performance with substance. And I'm done enabling that. Good luck funding your lifestyles without my money or Emma's. You're going to need it. With no love and much disappointment, Rose Elizabeth Vance. Robert set down the letter. The silence that followed was absolute. Angela's face had gone from white to red to a mottled purple. Her hands were shaking. Christopher looked like he'd been punched. Amanda was crying, actual tears this time, not the performed kind. This is fraud, Angela finally said, her voice shaking. She wasn't in her right mind. Emma manipulated her. We'll contest this. We'll sue. You're welcome to try, Robert said calmly. But I have documentation of your mother's mental capacity from 3 separate physicians. I have video of her signing the will, clearly stating her intentions. And I have her explicit instruction that if anyone contests the will, they'll be responsible for all legal fees on both sides when they lose. She was very thorough, Mrs. Mercer. She knew you'd try to fight this. He pulled out another document. The estate consists of the following assets. The family home in Madison Park, valued at $2.3 million. Investment portfolios worth $3.8 million. Various accounts and personal property totaling approximately $1 million. All of it goes to Emma Mercer, who is also named executor. Additionally, Ms. Mercer receives immediate access to $800,000 in liquid assets as of today. He slid a paper across to me. Emma, you just need to sign here acknowledging receipt of the preliminary distribution. I signed it. My hand was steady. Angela stood up so fast her chair fell backward. You did this. You turned her against us. Everything you've done, the website, the investigations, destroying Christopher's career, taking Amanda's condo, it was all to get to this. To steal our inheritance. I didn't steal anything, I said. Grandma Rose made her own choices. Just like you made yours when you threw coffee on me. Just like Christopher made his when he filmed it. Just like Amanda made hers when she posted it online. You created this situation. I just documented it. We're your family. Angela screamed. You're supposed to forgive us. You're supposed to let this go. Instead, you destroyed us. Over money. Not over money, I said quietly. Over basic human dignity. Over the fact that you saw me as a resource to exploit instead of a person to respect. I didn't destroy you. I just stopped participating in the system that kept you afloat. You destroyed yourselves. You were already broke. Already living on credit and lies. Already drowning. I was just the only one treading water, and when I stopped letting you pull me under, you finally sank. You're going to regret this, Angela said, her voice dropping to something cold and threatening. When you're alone in that big house with all that money and no family, you'll regret it. When you're old and you realize you have no one, you'll remember that you chose money over family. I stood up, meeting her eyes. Angela, I chose myself over people who treated me like trash. That's not choosing money over family. That's choosing sanity over abuse. And I'm not alone. I have people who actually care about me, who don't measure my worth by what I can give them. You're the one who's alone. You just haven't realized it yet. I turned to Robert. Are we done here? We're done, he confirmed. I'll handle the estate settlement over the next few months. You'll have full access to everything within 90 days. I walked out of that conference room and didn't look back. Behind me, I could hear Angela sobbing, the kind of desperate crying that comes when someone finally realizes they've lost everything. Christopher was silent. Amanda was already on her phone, probably trying to figure out if there was any way to contest the will, any loophole they could exploit. But there wasn't. Grandma Rose had been thorough. Strategic. She'd spent the last weeks of her life ensuring that the people who treated her granddaughter like garbage would face consequences even after she was gone. And as I walked out of that building into the November rain, I realized something profound. I'd started this journey sitting in a hotel parking lot with coffee burns and a plan for revenge. But revenge wasn't what I'd gotten. What I'd gotten was justice. The kind that comes not from destroying your enemies, but from simply removing yourself from their reach and watching them destroy themselves. My family had built their entire lives on a foundation of debt and lies and exploitation. And when I stopped being the foundation they stood on, everything collapsed. Not because I pushed, but because there was nothing real holding it up. That evening, I sat in my home office with a glass of wine, looking out at the mountains, processing everything that had happened in the past month. From the assault at the brunch to the viral video, from Christopher losing his job to Amanda losing her sponsorships, from my mother's public fall from grace to the will reading that had severed the final tie. I thought about the moral lessons buried in all of this chaos. The lessons that weren't just about my specific situation but about something universal that might help someone else who was living through their own version of this nightmare. Lesson 1: Document everything. If I hadn't had photos of my burns, medical records, screenshots of the video, financial records of my family's fraud, none of this would have worked. Abusers rely on, he said, she said, dynamics because they know they're better at lying than you are at proving the truth. Documentation removes the ambiguity. It turns your experience into evidence. Lesson 2: Silence is power. When they threw coffee on me, I didn't scream. When they posted the video, I didn't engage. When they showed up at my gate, I didn't argue. I just documented, filed reports, and let the systems I'd put in place do the work. People who thrive on chaos can't manipulate what they can't provoke. By refusing to give them the emotional reaction they craved, I denied them their fuel. Lesson 3: Consequences teach what conversation never could. I spent years trying to explain to my family why their behavior was hurtful. Years trying to set boundaries verbally. It never worked because they didn't respect words. They only respected consequences. Christopher didn't understand his behavior was wrong until he lost his job. Amanda didn't learn until her sponsorships vanished. Angela didn't grasp the severity of her actions until her reputation was destroyed. Sometimes people only learn when the cost becomes real. Lesson 4: You cannot save people who are drowning by letting them pull you under. My family was financially and morally bankrupt long before I stopped helping them. By funding their dysfunction, I wasn't saving them. I was enabling them to avoid the consequences that might have forced them to change. Cutting them off felt cruel, but continuing to support them would have been crueler to myself and ultimately useless to them. Lesson 5: Family is about behavior, not biology. The most important lesson of all. My grandmother was family. My fiancé Jacob was family. My cousin Rebecca, who'd reached out after the video went viral, was family. The people who believed me, supported me, and wanted good things for me without expecting anything in return, those were my family. Angela, Christopher, and Amanda were relatives. People who shared my DNA but not my values, my respect, or my future. And I was allowed to choose one over the other. I pulled out my phone and opened the blocked contacts list. Deleted my mother's number entirely. Deleted Christopher's. Deleted Amanda's. Not because I needed to prove a point, but because I genuinely didn't need those connections anymore. They had nothing I wanted. Nothing I needed. They were strangers who'd once had power over me, and now they didn't even have that. My phone buzzed. A text from Jacob, "Dinner's ready when you are. Made your favorite. Love you." I smiled. Closed my laptop. Stood up and walked to the kitchen where someone who actually loved me was making dinner in the home we'd built together with resources I'd earned and protected. This was the real ending. Not the will reading or the website or the destroyed careers. This. The quiet evening with someone who valued me. The freedom to spend my time and money on things that mattered. The peace of knowing that the people who tried to destroy me no longer had any power over my life. I'd been called selfish for refusing to fund their delusions. And they were right, in a way. I was selfish. I'd chosen myself over their comfort. My peace over their expectations. My future over their demands. And it was the best decision I'd ever made. Because here's the final truth they never understood: you don't owe your abusers forgiveness. You don't owe toxic family members your resources. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because you share DNA. What you owe yourself is protection, peace, and the freedom to build a life that's actually yours. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who only know how to take. Not because you're cruel, but because you finally understand that their emptiness will never be filled by your sacrifice. They have to learn to fill it themselves. And that's not your job. It never was. So let me ask you something, and I really want you to think about this. Who in your life is treating you like an ATM? Who's confusing your kindness for weakness? Who's demanding your resources while offering nothing but criticism in return? Drop a comment and tell me your story. Tell me about the family member you had to cut off. Tell me about the moment you finally said no. Tell me about the guilt you felt and whether it eventually faded. Because I promise you, you're not alone. There are thousands of us who've had to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation. And every single one of us who chose ourselves will tell you the same thing: it gets better. The guilt fades. The peace grows. And the life you build on the other side of that boundary is worth every uncomfortable conversation, every accusation of selfishness, every lost relationship that was never really a relationship to begin with. You deserve safety. You deserve respect. You deserve to keep what you've earned. And you don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting yourself. Not even family. Especially not family. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.